Now that we know how to find a percent of a number, let's talk more about the relationship between the percents and the parts and the wholes and that sort of thing. Remember, a percent is a part to whole ratio, so you can always take a percent and set it up as a part to whole where the percent is the part and 100 is the whole. So let's look at our first example. 24 is 30% of what number? Now, before I necessarily even have to go to solving this as a proportion, I might think about it as a model. 24 is 30% of what number? So 24 is 30%. So think about that for just a minute, what that means. It means if we think about a model and we think about 30%, well, the only way we can come up with 30% in 100 is if we split 100 into parts that are each 10%, and then 30% would be 3 of those 10 parts. So where I got that from is I thought of it as 30% equals 30 out of 100, and that simplifies to 3 out of 10. So even almost thinking about this like a fraction. So 24 is 30% of what number? So the 30%, these three pieces have to equal 24. So if those three pieces together have to equal 24, then each of them has to equal 8. If each of those are 8, then that means that all of the others are 8, and that our whole then is 80. We could also solve this using a proportion. We could say 24 is 30% of what number? So if we think about this as a part to whole ratio, remember the percentage is our part. So 24 is 30%. So that means this is a part and this is a part. So 30 is a part of 100 and 24 is a part of what number? That's the proportion that we would be setting up. And we could solve that by doing 100 times 24, which is 2400, and then dividing that by 30. And when we do that, we're going to get 80. So we could also work that one out that way. Looking at another example, 25% of what number is 20? So taking a look at this one, 25% we know is what fraction? Well, we know it's 25 out of 100, which is 1/4. So we're looking for 1/4 of some number. So 1/4 of some number is going to look like this. Here's our one piece that we're looking for, and then this is what we're looking for is our whole, 25%. We're going to have to figure out what that 25% is. 25% of some number is 20. So 25% of what is equal to 20? So this is our 25%, and we know that that 25% is 20. Well, what is it 25% of? Is 25% of, if I fill out the rest of this, 25% of what number is 20? It's 25% of 80. And we could again solve this by setting up a proportion. So we could say 25% is our part, or 25 out of 100. 25 is our part, and 100 rather is our whole. And then when we look at the rest of this, it says 25% of what number? So we're finding 25% of something. So when we're finding a part of something, that something we're finding a part of is our whole. So that's what we're looking for, is the whole. Whatever it is, 25% of that something is 20. So 20 is the part. What is it a part of, is what this is asking. So if we solved this, we would be doing 100 times 20, which is 2,000, and then 2,000 divided by 25, which is 80. So 25% of 80 is 20. And we could go back and check and make sure that that makes sense. If we fill it in, 25% of 80 is 20. If we went back and we worked it out, yeah, that works. All right, let's look at another one. 20 is what percent of 80? So now this time we're looking for our percentage. So 20 is what percent of 80. So we could do this a couple of ways. One of the ways that may make the most sense if you understood the proportions is to use that method. So 20 is what percent of 80. If we're looking for the percentage, we know that the percentage is always out of 100. So we're looking for what out of 100. So 20 is what percent? So that means 20 is our part because 20 is going to be our percent. So 20 is our part and 20 out of 80. Well, this looks actually pretty similar to what we did last time as far as how we've set this up. If we work this out, we're going to be doing 100 times 20, which is 2,000, and then dividing that by 80. 100 times 20 is 2,000. Divide that by 80, and we get 25. So what 20 is, 25% of 80 is what we have found out. And we could also work that out as a picture, and sometimes a model works well when we're looking for the percent. Sometimes it's a little bit harder, but 20 is what percent of 80. This one works pretty well. If you think of it this way, we think of 20, and how many 20s does it take to make 80? 20, 40, 60, 80. So we could set it up like that, where 20 is our part, and our whole is 80, and the 20 is what part of that? It's 1/4 or 25%. All right, one more. What percent of 400 is 120? So if we wanted to set that one up, what percent of 400 is 120? So part to whole ratio, and we're going to say, well, we're looking for the percent, so we're looking for how much out of 100. What percent of 40, or 400 rather, so we're looking for a part of 400. So that means 400 has to be our whole and is 120. So we want to know what part of 400 is 120. If we were to go through and work this out, we would be doing 100 times 120, and then we would divide by 400. Now, 100 times 120 is 12,000, and 12,000 divided by 400 is 30. So we're going to end up getting that x equals 30. And we can go back and check and make sure, make a model if we want to, and make sure that that makes sense. What percent of 400 is 120? So we think it's 30% of 400 is 120. Let's check and make sure. Again, I could use a model to check that. So 30%, if I split into 10 parts, I can see what 3 out of 10 or 30% would be. So if I split 400 into 10 parts, each part has to be 40. And then I can say 3 parts, or 3 out of 10, 30%, is equal to 120. So does it work? Is 120 30% of 400? Yes, it is, and I can prove it with my model. So you can use the modeling to work it out, or you can use the modeling just to prove that your answer makes sense. You can also use the proportion to help you work it out and or to prove your answer. So I want you to give a try to some other problems. Give these a try, and when you are done, hit play to see if you have them correct. All right, now that you've had a chance to do them, here are your answers, and over to the side I've put what proportion you would set up if you were solving these. Remember, these are all part to whole ratios. A tip that might help you is, remember, for example, if you're looking for what percent of 80, when you see the word of, your whole follows that. So that means 80 is our whole. So what percent of 80, or what part of 80. So that means we're looking for a part out of 80. And 60 is that part. So when you see the word percent, you might even be able to replace it or think about replacing it with the word part. So 24 is what part? So that means when you set it up, 24 has to be the part in your part to whole ratio. 6% of what number is 24? So 6% is a part of some number. And so it's a part of something. That means the number is our whole. So thinking about things like that might be clues that help you to better figure out what the part is and what the whole is. But setting these up as a part to whole ratio and or using a model to help you are great strategies.